Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of American Rambler. I'm your host, Colin Woodward. Thank you for listening to the podcast. On today's show, I have Wayne Edmondson. Wayne is a teacher in Louisiana, and we go back a ways to my graduate days and his graduate days at Louisiana State. Wayne was finishing up around the same time that I was, and I'm not exactly sure what year he started, but he was getting his master's. I was finishing up my PhD. So it had been a while since I talked to Wayne, and I partially used this podcast as a reason to catch up with folks that I've not spoken to in a while on the phone or seen them in person. And it's been since 2005 that I saw Wayne. So a lot has happened in his life since then, including some time that he spent in Iraq as a contractor. But he is a teacher now, so we talk about the teaching life and how to create strategies to help your students and getting through your first year and all that stuff. And certainly things have changed and become much more difficult with COVID, but Wayne is hanging in there. This talk was earlier in the summer. I had to look back and see when we actually did it. I think it was late June, so this is a couple months old, but it's mostly relevant except the fact that a hurricane came through Louisiana not long ago. Hurricane Laura knocked out a lot of power lines in Wayne's neck of the woods, though Lake Charles got hit really bad. I'm not sure how bad. I haven't, it's so hard to follow certain trends in the news cycle right now with Trump and all the other catastrophes that are going on. But it was a pretty bad hurricane. Didn't hit New Orleans or Baton Rouge, but Lake Charles is a good-sized city, and it went up into the north. So Wayne has had some damage in his property. His power was out for a little while, but it sounds like things are back online there. But they are cleaning up, and just about every year or every other year, one of the cities in Louisiana gets hit, and you never know. It's kind of why things are so crazy down there, and they like to party and kind of live one day at a time in a often drunken party animal manner. Obviously not everybody, but Mardi Gras is everywhere down in South Louisiana. So they like to live it up and eat good food because you never know when the next hurricane is coming. And I lived there for 8 years, and I was lucky that we didn't have any major hurricanes. Certainly some threats of them, and had tornado warnings and other things, but I was lucky while I was there, and I got out just in time for Katrina. But we all know what can happen down there, and this year wasn't as bad as it could have been. But if you're not getting hurricanes in Louisiana, you're getting tornadoes in Little Rock, and fires in California, and crazy 70-degree drops in Colorado the other day. They were like at 100 degrees and went down in the 30s and started snowing. So the weather is crazy, and we're not doing much about it right now. We can't until at least January of next year. So we're just trying to deal with that. It's been okay here in Virginia. We had some nice days this last weekend. Labor Day was very nice. A little worried about it becoming a COVID holiday because everyone hit the beach. But it was a nice day. Raining again now, so it's not great. But things have cooled down, so it looks like the worst of the summer is behind us, and October will be here before you know it. So, Wayne, he's not plugging a book or a movie or anything. It is a catch-up session, but it was great talking to him. We had a fun conversation about what he's been doing and sort of his career, and he's been a guy who's had a good number of jobs over the years and been around the world literally. A lot of it spent in a submarine, but he was over in the Mideast for a year. And before the conversation begins, I wanted to mention I have some good news. My book on Johnny Cash, Country Boy, The Roots of Johnny Cash, has been approved for publication. So University of Arkansas Press will be publishing it. It is scheduled to be the fall of 2021. So mark your calendars. I'm not sure exactly when it's going to be out. Don't know how much it's going to cost. But I just got my contract today, and the peer reviewers have signed off on it with minimal revisions, which was very nice to read. And also I was a little surprised, but my amazement lasted for a couple days. It was a good feeling to get some good news, and these troubled times. So once I get some time, I'll hit the revisions and check my footnotes and my quotations and all that good stuff, and hopefully have it ready in the next couple of months, and then it's on to publication. So very pleased with that, and on to the next thing. I already got another book project planned, but I will try to take some time to read and do a little bit of music and talk to some podcast guests, as I usually do, but maybe try to relax a little bit, but I tend not to do that. All right, well, here it is, my talk with Wayne Edmondson.
How I've been able to keep my sanity over the last few months is basically, unless there's an event that's damn near nuclear, I try not to pay too much attention to it.
Right.
Because it's just, I was told my wife last night, we were watching this documentary about stand-up comedy, and I said, what I would give for either George Carlin or Bill Hicks to be alive right now.
Oh, yeah,
because I know what their thoughts on all of this would just be golden.
Yeah. No, I know it's tough to follow the news at all right now, and I'm just hoping there's going to be a change, just if for the general psyche of the country, because I think it's just like there's this cloud over our heads all the time right now.
It's just this perfect storm of all of these things happening at once. It's okay. So it's
right.
Like, well, all these people are home because they have to be. They can't go to work. They can't do this. They can't do that. Okay. Yeah. This is definitely one of those times where I count my blessings, because it's like, yeah, well, my job's not in peril. We're trying to figure out exactly what we're going to be doing when it's time to go back to school. I did the last semester, I did it all online with my guys. Probably have to do some sort of combination of either in class or digital, but it's like, it's like the work situation is okay. The home front is okay. I mean, locally, everything's fine. I mean, we had some people protest in downtown, but it was peaceful. Yeah. Nobody raised, any ire over it. We got a Confederate memorial in front of the courthouse that I think they're going to move over to one of the Civil War battle parks around here. So, I mean, everything's pretty low key. It's like everybody in the neighborhood, no matter what you look like or what your orientations are, we all wave at each other. We're all happy to see each other. So, it's like,
well, that's good.
I really can't complain,
Yeah, well, that's good. And as crazy as the protests and everything have been here in Richmond, it was just so nice to knock the COVID stories out of the news. It's just like every night, every story was about COVID.
Oh,
and,
I know.
Now it's coming back into the news, unfortunately. But it's nice to at least see a political process going on that's progressive in my mind. I mean, it's. Again, I don't want to get into all that, but again, it's just been a relief. I think people need to just kind of let some air out in one way that's not totally destructive. I mean, some people think it is, but I think this is kind of what the whole historical process is about. And it could have been way worse. I mean, we could have had multiple people getting shot up or whatever. So it hasn't been too bad, thankfully.
And I guess with everything going on, I finally did get around to reading your book. So I did that last weekend. Yeah. It was really good.
Appreciate that. And I'm working on a new one on Johnny Cash. So hopefully another year or two, that'll be finished. But again, it's been good getting a break from that, because that can be a grind when you're trying to do a day job and do scholarship. And I miss those days of 8 hours at the library being on the computer. Probably a little self-indulgent, but at the same time, you just don't. I mean, you know how it is. You don't have time at night or on the weekends. So
and I think that was probably the biggest reason, amongst others, why I decided to step away and not get the PhD, because between the job market just being as unsteady as it has been over the last 20 years, and then with a lot of, if you were fortunate enough to get a job at a research institution, it's publish or perish. And the teaching kind of takes a back seat. And for me, it was the love of the teaching. So
Yeah.
I don't have to worry about that pressure.
No, that's good. I mean, if you love the teaching, you're doing the
Right.
right thing, and no one's going to stop you from doing a book in the summer or whenever you have time. I mean,
Right.
just do it whenever. Where exactly are you in Alexandria?
I am working in Alexandria. I grew up in Alexandria. My wife and I moved out to Pineville 4 years ago. And when I was working at Pineville, which I was up until a month ago, well, it only took me 10 minutes to get to work. But now that I have changed schools, it's like I've doubled my commute, but it's worth the trade-off.
And that's not too bad, I guess.
No.
Everyone sort of has their magic number or their cutoff that they're not willing to go past. Right. But on a good day, it's usually what, 20 minutes, he said?
Yeah. And I mean, you lived in
That's
Baton
not
Rouge.
bad.
No, and you lived in Baton Rouge long enough that you know that it's like, this is just a drop in the bucket compared to the horror that traffic was. Oh my gosh.
Well, and you were just back there. How long had it been since you'd visited LSU?
It's been a while. I mean, I've gone back for a few games since I've come back from Iraq 10 years ago. But as far as actually traipsing around the campus and taking all that in, it's probably close to 10 years since I've done it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I haven't really done it since I left. I went to Baton Rouge once. When we were in Little Rock, we went down to New Orleans, or it might have been when we went to St. Francisville. But anyway, we did stop in Baton Rouge for a couple hours. We went to the Kids Museum. I went to Raising Cane's, and it's like the stress just started coming back like instantaneously because it's so congested around LSU.
It is.
It's unreal.
It is. And I knew something was up when we went down last week. And because we drove onto campus about 11 in the morning on a Wednesday or Thursday, and there was nobody there. It's like Highland.
Oh, yeah.
Highland is normally a parking lot. And I was able to go from the south gate to the north gate in the span of a couple of minutes. And I just turned to my wife. I said, I'm going to show you around. Yeah. But I don't think anyone's here or anything is open. So,
well, I'm guessing because of COVID, there's no summer classes, right?
They're doing them online.
Yeah.
I met up with one of my former students that I taught in high school, and she is now finishing up her degree in biology. And so she told me, it's like she's able to work in her lab because she has a job on campus working in the bio lab. But she says, I work there. The classes are online. Yeah, there's no classes taking place in person right now.
Okay.
Yeah, my wife and I were the only people in the quad when we walked around, which was unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, I think in the summer, if I remember, it was kind of the mornings were pretty busy, but then by 1 or 2, the place really cleared out. I mean, it wasn't all that different during the regular semester. I mean, you know how it was. I mean, you'd be like 5 o'clock going in the library. There's no one around unless it's like finals time.
Right. But, there's still going to be at least a few diehards.
Sure, yeah.
And there was none of that. And I was just gobsmacked by that.
I know. If you can clear out the nerds, something's really going down. I mean,
right.
I was in the library like every day pretty much and hanging out and whatever, even in the summer. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot to do.
Right. Yeah, it was either the library, my little office on the 3rd floor of Himes, or Highland Coffees. That was pretty much the beginning and end of my world as far as the weekdays.
Well, that's cool. Did you see any of your professors at all?
I did not.
Okay.
Let's see. The last time that I actually spoke to any of them in person it would have been probably about 10 years ago, the year that I worked over in Iraq, and we can go back and talk about that later.
Yeah,
but
sure.
I had a couple of weeks off, and I came in for a friend's wedding. And while I was in the country, a friend of mine, he came to Baton Rouge. He was giving a talk at the law school. And while he was giving his speech there, I walked over and met up with a couple of the folks in the history department that were still there. And there's still a few folks there, but I mean, it was already starting to change by the time that you and I left. And there was definitely a lot of new faces. And that was 10 years ago. And I can only imagine now.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's like there's the areas right off campus. It's like I turned to my wife, I said, well, there's a couple of places that haven't changed, but so much of this is unrecognizable now. And, I'm sure that also holds true for, just the people there.
Well,
it's been 15 years, No,
so. I know. It's crazy. And like I said, I mean, I've only been back once. One great thing about the podcast has been I've been able to catch up with people. So, there've been, I don't know, 6 or 7, maybe even more at this point of LSU folks. But,
Yeah, and those of the one I've listened to those, not
cool,
to cut you off, but I was like, he's talking to Dr. Foster. Oh my gosh, he's talking to Dr. Cooper.
It's weird
because it's like Dr. Cooper figured out how to use the computer to speak to Colin.
Well, and sadly, Charlie Royster just died. But I mean,
I know.
I knew he was never going to do it. I mean, he probably never.
Right.
He probably knows what a podcast is, but I'm sure he's probably never listened to any.
Right.
But I don't really know how well he was doing. I speaking of 10 years ago, I think that was probably the last time I spoke with Charlie, because I was at Smith College at the time and I was looking for a job, and I was so desperate. I was applying for academic jobs, I had no chance of getting any. So I talked to him on the phone for a little bit. But yeah, I mean, Gaines, Bill Cooper, I just talked to Chris Leahy, right. Bob Goodmastad. It's been great.
Yeah. And let me ask you, I'm just curious, because the last time that I saw Dr. Royster, and it actually ties into one of the questions that you shot me a couple of days ago, I was his TA when he had a stroke in class.
Right.
And I rode up with him in the ambulance and went and visited him a couple of times in the hospital. And he still wasn't very verbal at that time, because I believe he had another stroke
right
while he was in the hospital. How was he when you talked to him?
I went there.
I know it's been a while ago.
Yeah, I'm guessing it must have been maybe my last semester I was there. So maybe it's like early. Yeah, because the stroke happened. It was early 2005, right? It was like February or March. It was right before I had to finish my dissertation. And luckily, Bill Cooper stepped in, no problem, and that was great. But yeah, I remember you were TAing for him. It was the Civil War. No, it was the military history class.
It was the military history class.
Okay, yeah, because you taught that one in the spring, and I know you had been TAing for him, and you were the one that told me. I think you must have called me. We didn't have texting back then.
I know, right?
So old,
yeah,
right? Yeah. We didn't text. We called people, and
that's right.
And I visited him probably. It was before the end of the spring with Rand Dodson, and he was pretty out of it. I mean, he could talk a little bit, but he was very spacey, and it was kind of surreal. And I remember walking out with Rand, because Rand had to get his signature for the Vietnam book that he was working on, that collection of essays or short stories. And Rand said something like, that was like a conversation from a William S. Burroughs novel. Like, it just didn't make a whole lot of sense. But he, he was there, he just wasn't the same. And I had heard about his setback. Yeah, he had another stroke. And honestly, it was probably a miracle that he even lived through that.
I know, and that he hung on for almost another 15 years.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's just tough old bird.
Well,
but
I guess he kept teaching, right, for a while.
I'm not certain.
Okay.
That was one of the things that I and it's like I met up with Dr. Cooper the following summer. So this would have been 2006. And I asked at that time, and I think at that time, I'm not sure how long it was before they phased him over to an emeritus status.
Okay.
I'm not sure if he ever taught again. He may have, but I can't say with certitude.
I read the piece that Gaines wrote for the AHA, whatever it is, Perspectives, and it was mostly stuff that I knew. I wasn't sure if he had done any scholarship after the stroke. I'm guessing he didn't. I mean, if he couldn't teach, he probably couldn't write.
Right. And I think the last thing he ever did, Tales from Tonkin book, that actually that was for whatever reason he liked me, and he was, anyone who knew him, it's like I don't think we're talking out of turn or speaking out of school here, but he was, he was very set in his ways, and if he liked you, he could be the most charming, gregarious, sociable guy. He had his days, though.
Oh, yeah.
He could be a little gruff, but I think the reason why he seemed to tolerate me as much as he did was when I first started going back to college, and I knew he was one of the people that I would like to have studied with, him and Dr. Cooper. That was the reason why I wound up transferring to Baton Rouge when I did. But he served with my dad over in Thailand during the war.
Oh,
and
no
my dad
shit.
remembered him. Yeah.
Oh,
and so,
man.
I was able to tell him that. I was like, Dr. Royster, my father remembers you, because I think he was teaching classes over there while he was serving over there. And my stepfather would probably have not been inclined to take any classes with him in 67 or 68. He was too busy partying. But he knew about him. And so when I told him that was kind of like my in with him. He's like, oh, okay. And so, he was always very, just agreeable and warm with me. And one of the things that he did, he felt sorry for me. So he was able to, I got a job taking because he never used a computer,
right.
Taking his first draft and then converting that from typed notes to a Word document.
Okay.
So,
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. I didn't know that you had the military connection through your father, because I was never really sure what Charlie had done in Vietnam. It was kind of, it's so classic, but this is like, I mean, I don't know, maybe it wouldn't be that different now, but like there's sort of these rumors going around like, Dr. Royster was planning bombing missions along the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and he was doing this kind of like counterintelligence or something. I don't know. Right. But then I talked to him. He's like, well, I was pretty much, putting movies on for the guys on Friday night in the barracks. And I was like, all right, I'm getting two very different signals, but I never talked about it with him unless he wanted to volunteer something. But do you know what he did other than teaching?
Well, I think he probably did have something to do with the bombing runs that they were doing, because that would probably have been my dad's other connection with him. My father was with ordnance. And so, and probably some of the movies that Dr. Royster was showing my dad and others, besides, let's watch a movie from the States because it's Friday night. They were probably also watching films of the bombing runs. So, So he might have been a little evasive.
He was very secretive about his past and his private life. I don't know what was going on. I maybe didn't really want to know what was happening with Charlie. But I mean, he was on campus all the time. So
I know.
I mean, I think he tolerated me too, and I think. I mean, I don't know. Maybe just he saw something in me, but I think also the fact that I was all in at LSU. I mean, I had no family, just complete devotion to my work. And so, I did a lot of research, which, he did all the time. So I think there's some kind of chip off the old block with him to a certain degree.
Right.
But you're
Right.
right. I mean, if you caught him on a bad day, he could just almost make you cry. I mean, he could just be vicious.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And on your papers too. Did you ever get the full Charlie treatment on a paper?
He must have gone pretty soft on me when I had him for the super seminar, because it was, I think, I'm trying to recall now, I think we started out with him for the first half of the semester, and then they handed it off to Dr. Paskoff. Dr. Cooper was on sabbatical at the time, otherwise we would have gotten him. But he didn't leave a whole lot of red ink on my papers, and I'm certainly not some brilliant writer that would have warranted not having any comments, but I think he took it pretty easy on some of us.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was a bear with some of those folks who would, if you did not come in prepared, God help you.
And I think too, if you pretended to know more than you did, like if you were getting too big for your britches, he could really cut you down in size. But you're right. I think he was a fairly easy grader. I remember.
Oh yeah.
Because we had him the second half of the seminar. He did Jackson to the Civil War, and it was great because he was much more forgiving on my papers than James Lewis, who I don't know if he was still there when you got there, but
he was not.
Okay, he did the early American. I almost wonder if there's any like studies on this, but I almost feel like the more renowned certain professors are, the easier they are at grading. I mean, I'm sure there are exceptions to that, but that seemed to be kind of the case at LSU. Like I heard, well, I don't know about Bill Cooper. I never had him for seminar, but Charlie was fairly easy on his students, grad students and undergrad, because I think he just didn't really want to get into it with anyone. But I've heard that about other professors too at other schools. Like the big name guys were kind of the easiest graders. But there are other people. Yeah, I mean, if you had Bob Becker, I heard he could be pretty mean. But I didn't have him.
I could see that. I never had him either.
But who was your group when you got in?
When I think about my group that I started out with in the grad program, because that super seminar, they just packed everybody in there, you know, MA students, doctoral students. It's like, you know, if you're coming from another program. And I think of the ones that I started with, I'm not sure if anyone actually finished their PhD there. Okay. And there were probably about 10 or 12 of us in that group, but there were a couple of my friends who wound up getting their master's degrees, and then they went on to Tulane and they got their PhDs at Tulane. But I don't know if anybody, forgive me if you're listening out there and I forgot about you, but I don't know if anyone actually finished their PhD at LSU in that crop.
Okay, well that could very much be, and I don't know, you know, with some people, if they lived in New Orleans, in the New Orleans area, I mean, Katrina might have completely thrown them off for a couple of years, because I know
that's right. Yeah,
there were some people who were in the program that were from there, and then, you know, whatever they had to do, they either moved to Baton Rouge or moved somewhere else. Some were like coming back into the program or leaving the program. I don't know. I mean, it was just a disaster. I left just before that happened, so I luckily avoided that whole mess. Yeah, that's kind of a bigger group than I went in with, and I think the program usually isn't more than 12 people, like you said. I think sometimes it maybe gets as high as 15, but mine was pretty small. I think it was about 7 or 8 people, but the attrition was bad. I mean, I think it was just me and James McDonald that finished the PhD. Not everybody went in thinking they were going to get a PhD. But some people, they lasted a year and they were done. Had you thought about getting a PhD? I feel like you were at some point.
Yeah, I went from when I first went to college thinking, okay, well, let me get my bachelor's degree and come back home and teach. And then once I actually got into it, I fell in love with it. And I said, well, maybe I could make a go of this. And so then it went from just get the bachelor's and maybe get certification work done for, you know, a secondary school teaching career. And it's like, well, let me get the master's degree. And actually, my senior year at LSU, I took the LSAT and I took the GRE, and LSU Law had accepted me and the grad program had accepted me. And I was really on the fence as far as which path to go. I figured in the end of the day, I would probably be happier reading history books instead of law codes.
Yeah.
It may not necessarily make as much money. Of course, I think one of the other things is I did have a couple of friends of mine who had already graduated law school and they were struggling. And I was like, yeah, it's like it's no slam dunk that, you're going to go off and be a, prosperous and successful lawyer. So I was like, yeah,
right.
let me do the MA. And then from there it was get the PhD. But, if I would never go back and do any of it all over again because I'm so happy with the path that I have now and my family and all. But the one thing I probably would have done differently if I could, I probably would have finished the bachelor's degree elsewhere. That way I could have got the master's and the doctorate from LSU as opposed to having all three degrees from there had I finished out the PhD, because you get out on the job market and it's like, oh my gosh, academic inbreeding.
Right.
What can we do with you?
Yeah, I mean, God, I mean, you look back and you think like what your options were. It sounds like you had some options there, though. I mean, getting into law school, that's pretty cool. But you're right. I mean, and even if you can make a living as a lawyer, like you said, it can be really boring. I mean, it's not.
Oh yeah.
It's not like TV where you're grilling Jack Nicholson about code reds
yeah.
and everything. It's like
right.
really dull paperwork and procedural stuff. I mean, I have a friend who's a lawyer in New York City, and I guess he's doing okay. But I mean, he's not living in a palace. But
right.
But it sounds like you came from teachers. Your dad was in the military, so you've tried both that, and obviously teaching you've enjoyed doing better. I don't know. What was your time in the military like? How long were you in the Navy?
I'm actually one of the few people, either my generation or previous generations, that even graduated high school.
Oh yeah.
Very working class. And I was a pretty good student. As a kid, didn't really have to work very hard at it. My family was encouraging, but didn't really have much in the way of any sort of roadmap as far as what to do next. And so when I graduated high school, that was in 1992, I had gotten a scholarship to go to Northwestern State up in Natchitoches. And so I went there, and this was back in the bad old days when you could drink and party legally at 18. And as a kid who had been a pretty good kid, hadn't really indulged in much of anything before that point, went off with no supervision, got a taste of freedom. First time that, hey, here's legal alcohol, here's girls who are actually paying attention to you. And I lost my freaking mind, Colin.
Yeah.
And so I came home and I was, it's like, had pretty much partied my way out of school and knew that I was going nowhere, and looked around and saw the path that I was going. It's like, oh my gosh, it's like I see too many other people, like either my parents' generation or friends that are going down the same path. I got to get out of here. And it just so happened I had just this miserable dead-end job. I'd finally had enough. The day that I quit, the Navy recruiter called the very same day. And so I said, well, what else is going on with my life right now? Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
I want to be in a summary.
Yeah. Well, and the story with that is pretty funny because it was my dad who had been in the Air Force during Vietnam. He'd said, well, if you're going to try a branch out, is try the Navy because, and that's what he had wanted to do. He wound up volunteering for the Air Force before he got drafted for the Army.
Okay.
The Navy was all their billets were filled up quick,
right.
Back in the 60s. And so he said, go out and see the world. And so I went and talked to the recruiter and took the ASFAB and did all that. Did pretty well on that. And the first couple of jobs that they offered me, one was to be like a personnelman or a yeoman at the Pentagon, which would have been cool, I suppose. But, it's like I told the recruiter, I said, I want to go out and see some stuff and do some stuff and not just be in an office all day. And once I said that, he's like, oh, okay, I got a live one here. And so, and then they offered me some submarine jobs, like being either a nuclear machinist mate or a nuclear electrician or a radioman, but those were all 6-year enlistments. And I didn't want to do a 6-year enlistment. I wanted to do 4, and I figured, well, if I just fall in love with it and want to make a career out of it, I'll re-enlist at that point. But I'll do 4, and I'll, see if I want to stick with it. He said, well, have you ever seen The Hunt for Red October? I said, oh, yeah, I've read the book, seen the movie. He goes, do you remember Jonesy? I said, oh, yes. He goes, well, we need sonarmen. So I was a sonar technician, and I did that for 3.5 years. This was... I went in 94. I got out in 97. This was during the Clinton administration. So they were doing really deep cutbacks by the time that we got to the mid and late 90s. And they were offering people early outs. And I said, well, do I get to keep all of my benefits and all of that? They said, well, yeah, absolutely. I said, okay, I want to go home. So, but I spent 3.5 years. I was on subs. I was stationed out at Pearl Harbor. It's like I always tell people, though, I lived out in Hawaii for 3 years, but if I actually count the time that I was actually at Pearl Harbor in those 3 years, it probably comes out to less than a year because you're just constantly on deployment.
Right.
And so, that was my life until I decided to go back to school.
And so were you going out to Asia? Like
let's see. I wound up doing, it's like a month after I got out to my first boat, we wound up doing a 6-month deployment, a Western Pacific deployment, a Westpac. And so, I got to go to Hong Kong, Thailand, Japan, where else? I'm blank, Singapore, Guam several times. So, got to do quite a few of those ports of call on just that deployment. And then you can go ahead.
So you're partying too much in college and you say, I want to join the Navy so I don't party too much. Is that
well? I know, right? I can see. I can see there might be some fallacy in this train of logic.
I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. What are those guys like?
Well, and again, it was when you're underwater for 2 to 3 months at a time. Well, there's not a whole lot you can do.
Well, sure.
Besides, right. And I did have a few episodes of Young and Drunk and Stupid once I got into the military, but I pretty much got that all out of my system.
Okay.
Within a year or two.
So it worked for you?
It did.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things of, I certainly would not go back and do that again. I'm so thankful I did it.
Yeah.
It instilled self-motivation. It instilled discipline. It's like, even now, I'm still one of those, if I'm not 5 minutes early, I'm late, which just made me mortified when I was late today. I was like, it's like, come on.
Yeah.
But, and without pumping myself up and without divulging too much, there have been other times in life, even when things got rough with school, with other jobs, I'm like, well, you know what? As rotten as this may feel right now, you're not underwater. and a radioactive tin can getting shot at. So keep things in perspective.
And I mean, I'm certainly, not picking on you or poking fun at the military, because it really just comes down to, are you going to pull your shit together or not? I mean, you could be doing anything in your early 20s. I mean, people are just fucking crazy when you're that age. I mean, you just want to cut loose.
Yeah, you can say. I'm sure you're also thinking about this as a father of young girls too. It's like, oh gosh, just please don't make half of the dumb mistakes I did when I was at it.
Well, and I worry about girls too, because there's a whole set of things that come with that later. Right now, it's kind of all things are equal with young kids, but it never ends, and you've got to step up at some point. But it's funny because I never really met anybody in the military till I got to LSU. That was one of the things that was really fun, because you met guys from the Navy like you met guys that had been in the Marines. I remember meeting this one dude who was an Army Ranger. So it's kind of like the whole spectrum of guys, and they were really funny, and I really liked hanging out with them. It was awesome.
Right. And then I'm going to say, Keith Finley, was he in the Marines?
He was in the Marines, yeah.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, I used to, we'd sign off. I'd say, Semper Fi, Keith, see you tomorrow,
Right.
And the Marines especially, man, I mean, they're just nuts. And there's that guy, Dave Fisk. Do you remember him?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so he was a Marine, just crazy as hell. He died a couple of years ago, but I mean that.
Oh no!
Yeah, he did. So that was definitely a side of American life and culture that I had not been exposed to, because my dad, he was in the National Guard because he didn't want to go to Vietnam, understandably, but I just didn't grow up in that culture. And you think even like my grandfathers, they were in World War II, but non-combat roles, they did their part. But it's funny. It's just something I've been fascinated by in military history. We were both in Dr. Royster's class and all that stuff, and we've studied all that. So it's a really fascinating thing. It's something I kind of miss, because it's just such a weird group of people at that, that age, that time. And unfortunately, like you didn't know about Dave Fisk, like, people just, and I've said this on the podcast before, so I apologize for repeating myself, but like, people just kind of disappear. There's no like ceremony when someone leaves, either they graduate or they don't, but like,
right.
I don't really remember. I remember you being there, and I remember you not being there, but everyone kind of had their reasons for staying in or leaving, but you never really knew. It sounds, not to sound dramatic, but like, you didn't really know when you're going to see somebody for the last time. It'd be like, no social media.
Yeah.
One day we're talking in Himes Hall for 3 hours. Next thing you know, the person's gone. You never see him again.
Yeah. Without being too flippant about it, I guess in some ways it could have been like guys, either in Europe during World War II or the Nam. It's like, oh, well, what happened to Smith? Oh, he didn't make it. And it's always, it's like, really?
That historiography seminar, that did him in, man.
Oh, yes, yeah. Foster strikes again, so it was.
But did you just kind of hit a wall? Or you just wanted to do, what was your rationale behind moving on?
That's a great question, because the initial plan, as we discussed, was, bachelor's out of the way, get the master's. I actually applied to several other doctoral programs, like Rice and Emory and Tulane and Vanderbilt. It's like I wanted to stay in the South. I wanted to apply to some schools that actually had some money so that I wouldn't have to rack up any more debt. And because I was very fortunate in that the GI Bill, between the GI Bill and the Navy College Fund and grant money, I was basically getting paid to go to school as an undergrad. And then as a grad student, I got my little assistantship, but it's like I took out some loans to, make sure that I could keep a roof over my head and food on the table. But a couple of the schools that I applied to just flat out said no. A couple of the others said, well, sure, but we don't have any money, which was probably just a polite way of saying no. But LSU was the fallback. And actually, Dr. Cooper got very upset with me when I told him, well, these were the schools I applied to. And he said, well, why didn't you apply to Virginia? Well, in UVA, if I'm not mistaken, that's what we had modeled our seminar program and all. I think we modeled it after them.
That's
and,
right.
I mean,
that's right.
They, they definitely had a bear of a reputation. And I was just thinking, oh my gosh, I didn't even try to apply there because, like, well, could I handle it? But then, he let me know in no uncertain terms, yeah, I could have. And then also, his college roommate was one of the professors there. And so it's like, you had an in, you should have just let me know and I would have wrote for you to go there because Michael Holt was there.
I was just going to say, yeah.
Yeah. But I was like, that just seemed too far away at the time. And I was, it's like I wanted to be somewhere that, God forbid, if anything happened with family, I could drive home in a day or so. But it's like, I hit a wall. My master's research, I liked it enough, but well, you know better than I do. Just the research side of it, it's such solitary work. And I did my thesis on the Confederate Congress, and it was okay. It didn't light a fire under me at the time to continue working on that for a doctorate at the time. Knowing what I know now, well, gosh, I'd probably done enough research to at least get started with that because I had to wind up cutting myself off with a master's thesis. I think, if anything, I had a couple of my friends who told me afterwards that Dr. Cooper used me as the example of this is exactly what not to do as far as being brief and concise with a master's thesis. My master's thesis was like 140 pages. Okay. And so, and so he's like, you could have written half of that. It's like, but I want to get all the research in,
I understand that. And well, we had very different advisors because Bill Cooper, I think, was much more, stay on time, just get it done. Master's thesis, 60, 80 pages, dissertation, 250 to 350, and then get the hell out of here. Whereas Royster would be like, if you want to do a 150-page thesis, I don't care. He wasn't going to put the brakes on you. Same thing with the dissertation. And there were pros and cons to that. I think, maybe, I don't know if it would have been any better if you'd switched advisors, but Bill could be, I don't know what the word is, but like a little more no nonsense with that kind of stuff. And that's too bad that you just didn't have the, I don't know. You moved on and you seem like you're happy doing what you're doing. It's not easy. And if you had to do another 5 years for your dissertation,
that was, it was, in part, it was that. It's like, oh my gosh. And by that point, because I got a little bit later of a start, doing the military. By that point I was 30 and it's like, okay, well, what have I done so far with my adult life? I've been on a boat or I've been a student, and I'm just like, come on. And it was like I said, at the time, I really just had got burned out, and I was on the fence. Do I stay or do I go? And then, like I said, when Charlie Royster had his stroke in front of me, I was like, yeah, I think I'm done. Yeah. I'm going to finish out this semester and just quietly move on. But,
and I think, Charlie, in a way, he's kind of a cautionary tale.
Oh yes,
he did write his books and he was well known. He won prizes and stuff. But, I think, the last 15 years of his life, it was sort of the opposite of everything that he set himself up to do. He just wanted to keep writing, keep researching, and he couldn't do that because he didn't take care of himself. And,
and he was a confirmed bachelor, and just it was
living hard, man.
Lived hard, and it's like, I think at the time, it's like when he had the stroke, and of course this is before I had a cell phone, but it's like I sat up there for hours. I was the only one up there for a while. Then eventually, I think it was Dr. Stater and Dr. Cooper who came and got me and took me home. But they were scrambling, trying to find family for the guy.
Right.
And I think he had a sister and a nephew, and that was it. And because it was like, and it was a hell of a thing, because the doctor was putting the paperwork in front of me. We need somebody to sign off so we can do surgery on him. Yeah, do it, you know? Yeah. And you know, and it was like at that point in my life, I mean, I was 30, I was single. I was like, kind of felt like I was just spinning my wheels in life. And I'm like, okay, and I'm not nearly the scholar or the writer that he is. And while I didn't envision myself living as hard and as solitary as he did, like you said, it very much was a cautionary tale. It's like, you could wind up going down this road if you're not careful.
And without the books and without the prize.
Right.
I mean,
right.
That's a much more common stories that, you know, people just, you know, you indulge and it becomes habitual. And if you don't have anything anchoring you, you can really, you know, spin off. But no, I mean, it was, you know, I was finishing up, so I had, you know, my own stuff I was dealing with. I was in a relationship. So, you know, I got to visit him that one time and had very little interaction with him, you know, once I graduated. Well, before I forget, you mentioned Iraq and your time there. You finished your master's at LSU. What were you doing in Iraq, and how'd that all happen?
It's funny because I'll have kids, they'll ask, well, what were you doing? And so I'll occasionally, or when I'm teaching class, especially as we get into contemporary America, when I'm teaching my American history class, I'm like, oh yes, I was here, I was doing this. And so long story short, so when did you graduate?
2005, the spring of 2005.
Okay, so you got 2000, and that's when I left.
Okay.
And let's see, summer of 2005, I was just kind of bouncing around working different temp jobs. And then Katrina happened, and I wound up getting a job with the federal government doing disaster relief for the next year. It's like FEMA needed to get local people to work for them because they were just so unpopular at that point. And, you know, so they wanted to put a local name and face to the work that they were doing. And so I wound up spending a couple of years between working for the federal government and working for the state doing that.
Okay.
The nature of those jobs were always temporary, but, you know, especially the federal job, it's like, well, while I can maximize what they're paying me, I'm going to do it. And so as that stuff started to wind down by 2008, I wound up getting a job for a couple of years. Again, and during all of this, I'm thinking, well, eventually I think I would like to get back into teaching, but I just want to walk away from this and see if I miss it at all.
Yeah.
And I had actually applied for a couple of teaching jobs in Baton Rouge, and I hadn't heard anything back. And then I had a family member who turned me on to a job working as a surveyor down in the Gulf of Mexico. So I did that for a couple of years, and it's like the education had nothing to do with that. That was strictly Navy experience.
Yeah,
because I was using GPS and sonar to put boats and rigs and divers on location and lay down pipeline and do all that stuff. So I did that for a couple of years. The money was pretty good. It's better than anything I'm doing as a teacher, but I was just gone all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, it was my last year that I did that before I went to Iraq. I think I was gone 250 out of 365 days. And I was just like, this is no way to live. This is no way to, you know, have a family or do anything like that.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I was looking for an out, and a friend had told me about contractor work in Iraq. And when he told me the money and he told me the tax breaks that you get, because if you do at least 330 days a year out of 365 overseas, the only tax that you had to pay at the time was your FICA and your Social Security. And then when I looked at the money that was being offered, I'm like, yeah, I'll go do this for a year. And then that should be able to give me enough of a nest egg that if I want to jump out and give teaching a shot, well, I'm not going to have to be scrambling hand to mouth. So yeah, it was from 2010 to 2011. That's when I was working over in Iraq.
Okay. Well, it's funny when you sort of say how much you're bouncing around. It's like something out of a Hemingway novel or so. I don't know. You're like,
yeah. And I was reading a lot of Hemingway at the time too. So it's like, oh yes, I'm the man of action. It's like, I'll
go work in an oil rig. It's like,
yeah.
Well, so when you're working for FEMA, was that in New Orleans or the area? A lot of that?
That was some bouncing around also.
Okay.
When I got hired by them, and they had disaster recovery centers all over the state, all over the Gulf Coast, because people just ran everywhere.
Yeah.
And then I'm not sure how much you remember, but then it was Hurricane Rita hit Southwest Louisiana and East Texas like a month after that. So then there were more people that were running. And so the first 3-4 months, they had a spot in Alexandria open. And I said, send me there because I can stay with family. You don't have to worry about paying me a per diem for my hotel and my meals. I'll just stay with family.
Okay.
And so I started out there. And then after that, I wound up working for close to a year down in New Orleans.
Okay.
And then after that, I was able to come back to Baton Rouge, and I caught on with the state, working for them.
Okay.
With disaster relief work.
Okay. And you're there in Iraq. Obviously, the war's been going on for a long time. Where exactly were you, and what was the danger level there?
Well, let's see. The first couple of months that I was there, because the job that I got, I was hired by KBR, Kellogg Brown and Root, and they had the U.S. postal contract over in Iraq. They provided all the people that worked in the post offices over there. And the first couple of months that I was over there, I was in Baghdad, there for my training and working until it's like, okay, well, we've got enough people trained up. We can now send them on to the different spots and the different bases around Iraq. And while I was there really wasn't any sense of danger, I would say, between, let's see, I started out, I'm trying to remember the name of the first camp. I think it was Camp Stryker. And then I was over at Liberty. You would hear the incoming alarms going off occasionally, but they had the gun set up, the CRAM, to where they can knock stuff out before it was usually ever a threat. And so no real danger there. There were a couple of times you would run to the bunker because, hey, there might be something coming.
Yeah.
But no real danger there. And when I got there, it wasn't that hot yet either. So, you kind of got lulled into this sense of false security. No, it's not going to be that bad. It's not going to be that bad. But then I wound up, the bulk of my time was at Camp Warhorse, which is Bakuba, and that's in the heart of the Sunni Triangle. And that was actually where, I don't know if you remember, al-Zarqawi, who was the head of the Iraqi Al-Qaeda, and like 05, 06, when they were, capturing soldiers and cutting their heads off on YouTube and all of that.
Okay.
That's where his base of operations was. And actually they did a big nighttime raid and killed him. I'm trying to remember what year that was. I think that was again like 05, 06 when they killed him. So we're there, and it was a small little base. In all fairness, it's like the high school campus that I used to work at wasn't all that much bigger than Camp Warhorse. And so when they had the incoming alarms, it's like you took them a lot more seriously because it was too small for them to have the C-RAM, try to knock anything out of the air. Now, they usually didn't try to do anything unless there was a sandstorm, because then they could get close to the wire, pop off some orders. But luckily for us, they usually couldn't tell which direction they were going in because it's in the middle of a sandstorm as far as when the insurgents are setting off the mortars. The closest calls that I had, actually the closest one that I had was, and there were a couple of mortar strikes that were close enough that you could feel them. And it's like, and then you would run to the bunker. But actually, the very closest one that I experienced was my last day there. I was being transferred to Al-Assad, which is a big Air Force base over in the northwestern part of Iraq, pretty close to the Syrian border. And so it was Thanksgiving Day, as a matter of fact. And again, I was very lucky, blessed, however you want to look at it, because I was moving. I had my body armor on that day because I was getting ready to go to the heliport to take the helicopter back to Baghdad, and then they were going to fly me to Al-Assad. And as I was walking to the main office, and I've got my helmet on, my Kevlar vest on, I've got my bags, that one I could hear the mortar coming before it hit. I could hear it whistle through the air before it hit. I'm thinking, oh gosh, this one's going to be close. And it was pretty close. I mean, it's like I definitely, when the blast came, I felt the heat, the rocks around me flying past me. I could feel the waves going through the internal organs, even with the Kevlar on. And it's like, okay, at that point, all right, get up, run to the bunker, and then pat yourself down and make sure you still have all of your parts attached. And fortunately, I did. And
was this at night or day?
It was about noon when that happened.
Okay, was that kind of ballsy for them to do it during the middle of the day or not?
It was.
Yeah.
It was also on Thanksgiving Day.
Oh, right.
And so it's like, what better time to try to demoralize you than hitting you on a holiday?
Yeah.
And I got really blessed because right after I left, and initially I did not want to leave Warhorse. It was small. I had a very close circle of friends there. We got along wonderfully. I mean, it's long, hot work, but you make the best of it. And, I certainly wasn't complaining about the money I was making, and I was in the best shape of my life because what else is there to do besides go to work and work out?
Right.
And so it's like I didn't want to leave, but there's like, no, we need to transfer you over to this other base because we need good workers over here. I'm like, okay. And I had been very unhappy about that, but after that close call, I packed up my stuff and I went and I said, the first thing smoking, y'all throw me on it. I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
And
so how long were you at that last base that you
I wound up at Al-Assad. I was there. That was from the end of November to February of 2011. And just a little postscript to Warhorse, right after I left Colin, that's when the attacks on that base started getting really bad. I had one of my friends who stayed behind, and he emailed me a couple of times, and he was like, yeah, it was like our little living quarters that we had, they started getting very, very close near misses to there. And actually, a couple of the chews where the soldiers were living, they were getting hit. And turns out that what happened was some of the interpreters, when they would go on the missions outside the wire, there was some of the insurgency who knew who these guys were and had told them, we know that you didn't bring all of your family back to the States. So either make things easy for us, or we're going to make things very painful for you. So there were Iraqi interpreters who were on their cell phones calling in coordinates for the insurgents to pop off the mortars. Yeah.
Jesus.
So, and again, I got out of there just in time for that.
Yeah, that was a good move. And, like getting, killed or seriously wounded on your day of the transfer, that's just too much of an irony to
oh, I know.
to stand. It's too
right.
Hollywood. So luckily you made it out of there. So by the time you got a few months in at El Asad, were you just like, I'm done, I'm going home, I'm through with this?
Yeah, it's like I could have stayed there. I mean, the work there, and at Al Asad, it was, you're smack dab in the middle of the desert to where you could have seen anything coming for miles as far as any sort of threat. And it was also a major Air Force base, so there was constant combat patrols by the fighter jets. So you felt very secure there. But I looked and I had talked to the accountant that I had hired to handle my taxes. And I said, how many days do I have at this point? He said, well, you've surpassed your 330. I said, okay, so I could go home right now if I chose. He said, yeah. And that was the wonderful thing about the job, the demobilization or demobbing, is that at any point you could go to the people at KBR and say, okay, I'm ready to demob, I'm ready to go home. And within a couple of days, you were on a plane back to the States. And part of me had thought about, and I had financial goals. This is how much money I wanted to save up while I was there. And I had definitely hit all those targets. So I'm like, well, at this point, the only thing that's keeping me here is the paycheck. And so I was able to time it out perfectly to where I was able to come home. I landed back in Alexandria on February 14th, 2011, and my grandfather's birthday was February 15th. So I was able to go knock on his door and surprise him with being back in the States.
Oh, that's cool. Were you guys pretty close?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
He was more of a father figure than, anybody. And, so probably the closest person in my life, especially through my childhood, and was able to go home, surprise him on his birthday, and he was gone within 3 months. And I got to spend a lot of time with him because his health declined precipitously after that. So I had enough money saved up. I didn't have to worry about anything else, and I could just go and sit with him every day. And that's what I did. And, it's like, and I didn't know that was going to happen, but I would have been out of my mind if that had happened while I was over in Iraq. So it definitely worked out for the best.
Yeah, well, it's good you had that time. And I think as you get older, you don't take things for granted like that. Like, certain people or whatever, you want to enjoy that time while you can. So you get back, and kind of what's the plan? What's the next step for you once you get home? I guess you just kind of took it easy for that summer. You visiting your grandfather?
Oh, yes. Yeah, it was. I got home. He fell, broke his hip, and then never left the hospital after that. I think he died May 16th of 2011.
Okay.
Then I spent, because again, at that point, I had saved up enough money that I didn't have to worry about anything. I basically drove around the country for that summer because I could, and I figured, when's the next time I'm going to be able to do this?
Yeah.
And then as the summer was winding down, I got in contact with the principal of my old high school. He, back, 30 something years ago, he had been one of my football coaches, and, he knew me and remembered me. And I said, well, hey, Coach Urbina, I'm going to send you my resume. Hopefully there is an opening, and I never heard from them. And so I needed to find something to do for a living because I didn't want to just blow all the money that I had saved from Iraq.
Right.
And so I knew eventually I wanted to get into teaching, but it's like, well, the school year is beginning, and I didn't hear back from the guy. So I wound up getting a job. Again, strange path that life took before I finally settled down. I wound up working on and off for a couple of years at a funeral home here locally, and basically wound up doing everything there but embalming people. And so I did that to basically, pay all the bills. And about a year later, there was an opening at Pineville High School right across the river. I applied for that, and they hired me. And so, but a little over a year later is when I started teaching at Pineville.
Okay. And
so, yeah.
It seems like you enjoy teaching quite a bit.
Yes. That first year was pretty rough because I got hired in October. So I was replacing a guy who he and his wife moved to Shreveport. So, you're not getting kids on day one. You're taking over for someone who was pretty popular. I had no clue what I was actually doing.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that just because you were a good student doesn't necessarily mean you'll be a good teacher.
Oh yeah.
And that first year, it was definitely, learning on the job. And
it's way worse than your first year of graduate school, I would say.
Oh yeah. Because it was not only is it having to come home, write the curriculum for the next day, but it's just still pretty fresh from time over in Iraq where, it was pretty no nonsense when it came to dealing with people. And now, you got a room of 15 and 16-year-old kids. And,
they're just animals. I mean,
right.
Some of
them,
it's crazy.
And some of them, oh my goodness. I mean, some of those kids, I wound up following what happened to, now I'll get to the ones who I wound up just having a wonderful time with for the next 3 years. But there were a couple of them, especially in one of my classes, they were just absolute hellions. And there was a couple of them. It's like, well, this kid he hasn't been here this week. What happened? Oh, he got arrested. He's not coming back. I'm like, that doesn't shock me. So there were some rough ones.
Yeah. But, no, I mean, public education, and I'm guessing you teach at a fairly nice school, or you have, but still you have kids in the system and that age too, 15, 16. Oh my God. It's like, get them out of here,
Right. And I was, I was teaching civics all day to a bunch of kids who really could have cared less about civics. And it was like, that first year was pretty rough. The next year it got better because they wound up doing musical chairs with me. It was another teacher who was teaching another set of classes. He got promoted to be an assistant principal. So the following October, I had to switch rooms again. But in those classes, it was now the bulk of the day were the dual enrollment history classes, the U.S. history and the Western Civ. And most of those kids actually wanted to be in there.
Yeah.
So that made a huge difference. And also by then, I would say that I had also gotten a lot better at being diplomatic with teenagers and, mitigating conflict and all that stuff to where it was like, all right.
That's a really tough age, man. I mean, because they're all hormonal and they're physically imposing, some of them. So it's like you don't even have the physical advantage over them. Not like, you're going to get physical with like the younger kids, but you know what I mean? It's like your own kids.
Well, actually,
you're bigger. So
actually,
I respect you.
Yeah. Actually, at that age, let's see, 7-8 years ago, when I was still like at the peak of my bodybuilding enthusiasm, I actually did have a physical advantage over most of them. So that helped. Yeah. And actually I'll tell you what actually wound up winning me over with one of my classes. And actually I turned the corner between this and, well, the one thing that I did that definitely helped is when I had inherited all of these other classes, I just kept, it's like I had no time to do any lesson plan. It's like, okay, here, take this guy's curriculum and run with it.
Yeah.
And I wasn't real enthusiastic with it, and I could tell they weren't. And so I decided, you know what, guys, when we come back from Christmas, this is all my material going forward.
Yeah. Yeah.
And once I took ownership of it, that definitely changed. But the other thing that definitely helped is there was a boy at the time, and I'm still in contact with him. He's just turned out to be a great kid, even though he's like 24 now. So, of course, I think of that as a kid now. But he was on the swim team and on the football team and, pretty good shape, pretty cocky kid. And he said, Mr. Edmondson, I want to challenge you to a push-up contest in class. And I said, well, here's the deal. If you make an A on the next test, I'll take you up on the challenge. Wow. And so we did it. And he said, you're not worried about losing to me? I said, no. And I'll tell you why. I said, I'm 3 times your age, so you should beat me. And either way, I win because either you beat me, and you should, or you got the A, and I got what I wanted out of you anyway. Yeah. And lo and behold, I wound up beating him in the push-up contest anyway.
Good for you. Good for you.
Yeah.
Now, after this sort of rough first year, did you think maybe I don't want to do this, or were you did you just hang in there?
Oh, it was going back and forth. Yeah. I was like, oh my gosh. Yeah. And I decided, well, let me go through and finish out the certification coursework. Let me see if I can actually get a full year from the beginning. Okay. Where I can actually have these kids from day one, and let's have a go of it. Like I said, year 2, they swapped me up again. But like I said, by the time that we got into the spring of that year, things had definitely improved. By year 3, by that point, I'd finished up all the certification coursework. That was a year where they finally let me just have the same group of kids from day 1 until day 180. Oh yeah, that was far and away the best year that I've ever had professionally. Yeah. It was, I mean, like I said, by that point, I'd been doing it long enough to where I knew it worked. I certainly knew what didn't work. I was able to establish routines and procedures from those guys from the first day, and I was able to carry out until the last day, and I was Teacher of the Year that year.
That's great. Whatever level of education you're at, I mean, there's a lot of talk. I mean, COVID aside, a lot of talk about college and should students go and how affordable and stuff. What kind of conversations do you have with your kids, since you teach kids that are like 15, 16, so they're like sophomores, juniors, I'm guessing?
I'm like, look, if this is what you're going to do, this needs to be your job, for the next, and especially the situation that they were in. I mean, this past year, we had about 9 or 10 kids who graduated from Pineville. They also had an associate's degree. They had 60 hours of college credit. It's like, y'all can be done with college in a couple of years, and actually, yeah. And so it's like, don't blow this, because I would have killed for this, And
that's something I should have done when I was in high school, take college credit courses. I was so sheepish. And if I had a plan at all in college, it was like, I'm just going to go straight through. I mean, so I got to LSU, did the master's, did the PhD, straight on through. I mean, I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I left, but I knew I just wanted to get it over with. And luckily I was good at it, so I could stay in. But, most people don't have a college degree, and I would gather most people that go to college don't graduate or don't do it in less than 6 years. I mean, it's a really tough thing for a lot of people to do, especially if you got, economic challenges and home life challenges and all that stuff. But it sounds kind of like you've been, I mean, I know you've kind of moved around and done different things, but it sounds like you've been fairly disciplined. Like sounds like you're kind of a morning guy. Is that right?
Oh yeah.
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 See, I was not. That's I think that's why teaching for me just doesn't work. Partly it's just my personality, my own anxieties and whatever, but also just like that routine of, like you said, you get up at 6 and you got to teach. Like I just can't do it. But you had that in the military, obviously. I mean, you guys are pulling early morning hours, right?
Well, yes, especially during boot camp and when I was in sub school and sonar school, and even when I got out to the fleet, you usually had to be to work on the boat by like 7:30, 8 o'clock. But there were some of those guys around me who were just coming in from downtown Waikiki back onto base.
Right. Worse for wear.
I think I did that once or twice, and I'm like, no, I can't do this. But and it was like, I mean, I'm much, the older I get, I'm much more of a morning person, and so it's like, actually, once we get to the school year, getting up at 6 would be late. I usually get up about 4 and work out and do all that.
Yeah.
I'm usually out of the door by 6.
Oh,
so,
wow. No,
class.
I think, I mean, some people disagree with me, but I think morning people are born, not made. I would have to be so beaten down to get into that kind of schedule, and I just don't feel good. I mean, I can do it, but it just doesn't feel good to me. But I think you actually enjoy it.
I do. It's somewhat perverse, I suppose, because like this morning, I actually slept in the latest that I've slept in I don't know how long. The baby didn't wake up until 8 o'clock, and both of us slept until 8.
Oh wow!
And that's the latest that I've slept in I don't know how long.
Wow.
Because I'm usually up before the wife or the kid.
Yeah.
So,
well, good for
even
you.
during the summer. Yeah. Well, it's I might wind up crashing out and taking a nap in the middle of the afternoon, but it's like I guess it's probably just comes back to, again, that time in the military. It's like, get up and get the unpleasant things done now, and then once the day gets rolling, okay, I don't have to worry about it anymore.
Right.
And I tried to apply that as much as I could, as a student, as a grad student, as much as I could. But even then, you're still pulling these crazy all-nighters to meet the deadlines.
Well, and it's just so funny at grad school, especially, but it's so stark the way people kind of run their schedule, run their lives, because someone like you or Keith Finley, I think those guys with a military background, they do their stuff in the morning. And like, I would be coming into campus, seeing Finley at the library, he's done for the day, and I'm getting there and it's like 2:30 in the afternoon.
Yeah.
So we were on a very different schedule, and if you're like, yeah, I'll join you at the Chimes for a beer, the day's over. Like, you're not going to get any work done after that.
No, not at all.
Because it could be 12 hours later and you're still out.
Yeah, and that would usually be one of the carrots that I would dangle in front of myself, would be like, okay, get everything done now. And I'll actually talk to the kids about it, my seniors. It's like things you can talk about a little bit more, with a 17 or 18-year-old than you can with a 14 or 15-year-old. I'm like, guys, put in the work now so you can play later.
Yeah.
It's like, it's like, look, I would try as much as I could to get everything done so that by the time that, Saturday and Sunday rolled around, I didn't have to worry about it. It's like, I went out to just about all the football games. I went and saw a lot of concerts. I was in bands, I dated, I did all that stuff, but it was just, that all was on the back burner until the work got done.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, well, maybe it's the last thing. I'm really enjoying this conversation, but you just mentioned you were in a band. You guys sounds like you were pretty good. I mean, you had paying gigs.
Yeah, it was just locally here in central Louisiana,
Okay.
and I only did it briefly. I mean, I've played on and off since I was a kid, um, but I, the funny thing about all of that is, I and again, I guess this just probably comes back to my background and my upbringing, and I'm very much the same way now. I'm not a good person with group projects because I'm like, okay, if none of the else of you are going to get off your butts and do it, I'm going to have to do it for you, and I'm going to bitch about it the whole time that I do it.
Right.
And so it was like I wound up, it's like I probably would have pursued it more, but as it's like no matter where you are, finding people who can play, who are actually committed, who don't have bad habits that get in the way, levels of enthusiasm, it never could quite line up. And it's like basically, it's like I wound up, it's like we started out, it was one of my friends who I'm still very close with. We had actually worked together when I first got out of the service. We worked together in a guitar shop, and he plays the drums and I play guitar. Hey, let's put a band together. And we just had a revolving door of other members, bass players, other guitar players, other singers. And some of them were really good. Some of them were like, okay, this guy looks great, but he can't play a note. Other guys, it's like, well, he sings like a bird, but he can't show up sober. So it's like, it's just all of that nonsense. It's like, you just feel like you're adult babysitting. So
Right.
we basically had a power trio where I was singing and playing guitar and wrote all the songs because, like, well, nobody else is going to do it.
What were you guys playing? What kind of stuff?
I was really into, at that time, I was really into like Cheap Trick and stuff like that. It was like this kind of late 70s power pop feel, because in the late 90s, it was like, it sounded absolutely nothing like what everybody else was doing at the time. It's like, especially here in Louisiana at that time, it was like all the other bands were either doing like the new metal stuff at the time, which is like the Korn and Limp Bizkit stuff, which just never did anything for me.
Yeah.
Or it was like that, the New Orleans sludge and doom metal stuff, which I absolutely love. And if I ever do anything again, it would probably be in that vein, but I couldn't find the people who wanted to play that type of stuff. So I probably had written about 15 or 20 originals. We would do like replacements covers and Cheap Trick covers and stuff like that. And, just kind of bounced around and played gigs at local bars. Sometimes we'd headline, sometimes we'd be the support. Actually, the first actual gig that we did was a local festival here, probably in front of 1,500 or 2,000 people. So the first time I ever sang in public was in front of that sea of humanity, which absolutely terrified me.
Yeah, I bet.
I just closed my eyes the whole time. We had practiced enough. It's like, okay, the muscle memory is good enough on guitar. I don't have to look at the fretboard, and somehow got through it. But I guess that's the thing that's even funny today, though. It's like, I can roll out of bed, I can lecture all day. Doesn't bother me at all. I can give impromptu speeches, I can speak in public, doesn't faze me. I still get stage fright. I still get anxiety. That was one of the other reasons why I just didn't play much once I moved down to Baton Rouge, even though I still love to play. And, I'm more of a bedroom musician than anything. Between finding people to play and then, oh my God, my anxiety at that time was just terrible. And it was, I might have a beer or two to try to take the nerves off, but it's like, I don't want to have any more than that, because then I'm going to start to get into, just being fuzzy and no good.
Blowing notes and stuff.
Yeah.
Well, and, anyone with any kind of musical abilities either, tried to be in a band or thought about being in a band. And if you really think it through, I mean, you might as well just like play the lottery. I mean, if you're like thinking about a career, I mean, it's
right.
so tough. I mean, obviously right now, no one's gigging or they're just getting back into it. So it is fun, but like, I mean, I think about people that are doing that and they're at a level where they're still just playing for 10 or 20 people. It's a grind, man. And not romantic at all.
No. And, it's like, don't want to go off onto too many wild tangents. I'll wrap this up soon if you need to, but it's like, between friends that I had and play, and it's like, I got to meet and know some of these guys fairly well. A very good friend of mine who's about 12 years older than me. When he was down at LSU back in the early 80s, he promoted all of the local punk rock shows, and actually all of the bands on the SST label, like Black Flag and the Meat Puppets and all that, they would crash at his apartment in the early 80s. So Henry Rollins actually met him several times in the 90s and the early 2000s. And he was one of the guys who was doing better than most, but I mean, he was still just grinding away. Even then.
Well, and
it's like
he's kind of a straight edge guy too.
Yeah, exactly.
So he didn't get all fucked up. I mean, these guys, there's so many pitfalls with that lifestyle, and just like the driving. I mean, it's brutal.
Yeah. And it's like, well, a lot of those people who I guess in that sort of gig economy, you think about circus performers, carnies, professional wrestlers, musicians, it's like, that's basically what you're doing. It's like you're
playing a state fair in, Searcy, Arkansas or something. I mean, it's like, holy shit.
Yeah.
I mean, there's, certain advantages to that, but like you said, it's like a whole another level of anxiety. 'Cause it's like you're the whole day, you're waiting to get on like 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. Like it could just be brutal. And not a lot of people do it, obviously. So it's sort of a select group, and a lot of it's like anything, a certain amount of persistence. But when I look back at like these guys who've really made it big in music, how young they were when they really got started. It's crazy. Like it is 15, 16, they're playing wherever. I didn't have
it's
that.
like, I was learning how to play at 16,
right.
And so, but it's like, obviously with some of these guys, they're prodigies, and then just some of them are too stubborn to say no. I was like, I guess before all of these shutdowns hit, my buddy and I will go down, we were going down maybe once every couple of weeks to like this one little bar in Lafayette where we could see a lot of these little local metal bands play. And I was watching one of these guys and been following his musical career for, probably since the late 80s. And I'm thinking, Jesus, this guy's probably pushing 60. He's still grinding through the club circuit, hoping, to make enough money on merchandise and the door that they can get enough gas in the van to make it to the next club and wash, rinse, probably crashing on somebody's couch, or they're sleeping 4 or 5 in a hotel room. And I'm just like,
it's crazy.
It'll just be a hobby. It'll just be a hobby.
Yeah. If I want to put something on YouTube, no one's going to stop me. You can mess around on your computer. No, I mean, God, the people that can do that. And like you say, they're in like their 50s or 60s, and talent has nothing to do with it. 'Cause we've seen bands that are great that don't have a huge draw, or just some dude in New Orleans who's like playing like Jimi Hendrix. You're like, no one knows who this guy is, but he's, belting it out on Bourbon Street or whatever. So, I mean, just to kind of wrap up, I mean, you've done so many things, Wayne, and it seems like you really enjoy teaching now. Is there anything you would have done differently or rearranged, or are you kind of happy the way things all turned out?
I figured you might ask that. I can't say that I would want to do anything differently, because if I did anything differently, I wouldn't have met my wife when I met her, and I wouldn't have my daughter, and I wouldn't want to give up anything for either one of them. I suppose it's one of those things, the mistakes I made and the things that worked out. I will sit down with kids and try to mentor them if they're receptive to it. It's like if I had to have done it all over again, I had an offer to West Point when I was in high school.
Oh, wow.
I could have done that. I don't know if I could have handled it at 17 or 18, but it was there. If it had worked out, I'd be on a completely different pathway.
Yeah.
There was part of me that, and I'll tell some kids, especially the ones who were, their academics is not their strongest suit, and they're sitting on the fence between like that or college or a trade, college, trade school, military. I'm like, yeah, maybe you want to go do trade school or the military and get your bearings underneath you before you go off to school. And I said, who knows, you might like it and decide that you don't want to go to college. One of the things, and I do talk about this, I'll talk about it with coworkers. I've actually run afoul with administrators in the past. I've said, y'all, I don't know why we have to persist in telling all of these kids either you could or you should go to college.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with getting a trade, but it's they're starting to phase away from that a little bit, but it's like, no, let's not have this one size fits all approach to educating these kids. This kid who's acting up in English class, well, maybe he doesn't need Shakespeare. Maybe we need to teach him how to turn a wrench,
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm probably rambling. So, if I had to do it all over again, if I could have gone that route, well, God only knows where I'd be now. And, if maybe I would have enlisted in the military first, but it worked out. I got all the stupid out of my system and then was able to go back and get the degrees out of the way. And I guess while I was there, I saw some different pathways that were available, and I figured, let me take, I certainly didn't intend on taking the long meandering route that I did to get where I am, but I certainly would say that I have a couple advantages over some other folks who all they ever did was, go to college and then went straight into education, so I can definitely point to some real life experiences that I had with these kids. Like, when we talk about Hurricane Katrina, hey, y'all, I lived through this. Let me tell you about it.
Yeah.
When talking about the war on terror, hey, y'all, I lived through this. Let me tell you about it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's not healthy to have too many regrets, but sometimes, you do like to think about, if I had taken this path, where would I be right now? Obviously your family, you value that and love that life too. But, if you'd done if you'd taken a major decision in another direction, that probably wouldn't have happened the way it did.
Right.
And I feel like now, I mean, I don't know, it sounds like you're a little bit older than I am, but like I'm turning 45 this year. So it's like you kind of start reflecting, and in not a like melancholy way or like regretful way, but just kind of like, I've done some things.
Right.
Maybe I have some lessons I can offer the world. I don't know.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I just turned 46, so a little bit. Yeah, so but I take stock of that sort of stuff all the time. It's like, I'll catch myself thinking, okay, it's 2020. What were you doing this time 20 years ago? And it's like, okay, I just showed up to LSU. It's like in Baton Rouge. I was taking those summer classes. It was like, think about where you are now compared to where you were then and what you envisioned then. And it's like, I'm pretty pleased with where I am, compared to where I thought I was going to go. I just didn't have a clue. I just knew I didn't want to.
Right.
It's like I don't want to be on a boat anymore. It's like when I got out of the service, I worked in my brother's cabinet shop until I coughed up sawdust, and I'm like, well, I'm not going to do this anymore. So,
yeah, no, I think any thoughtful person would be in any situation. You're like, well, I've got a number of choices. I don't know what's going to happen. So there's no shame in just making a decision one way or the other. I mean, a lot of people are just like not making decisions. I'm just going to stay in my mediocre situation or unhappy situation,
Right.
whatever it is. So you've been lucky that you've been able to do a lot of things. And I think if things are going pretty well for you or people generally nowadays, you're maybe just a few clicks away from everything being where you want it. It's
Right.
never going to be perfect, but if you get
Right.
very close, and just try to take care of those things that you need to take care of. But some days I'm just like pure survival mode. Just like, I'm just glad I'm still around, still have a job. Everybody's relatively healthy. I'll accept that right now and just keep moving forward.
Yeah, and I guess just the nature with your work. I mean, is this a permanent position that you have? Or
it's not.
Oh.
And I've kind of been in career purgatory for a while, and part of it's been my own bad decisions and just bad luck. But yeah, I mean, if I could get that taken care of, that would be really nice. But at the same time, you look around now, I mean, God, I'm glad I have a job. I have benefits.
Right.
And we're doing okay. Just hope something comes through without having to make some sort of dramatic career change. Yeah, like you, some things are not where I want it to be, but most days I'm like, this is going pretty good, and God knows what next year is going to look like.
Right.
Well, Wayne, this has been really fun, man. I'm so glad we were able to do this, and
absolutely,
this is going to be a long one, but I had a lot of fun, so I was glad you could do it, and if you want to do it again sometime, just give me a holler. I'd love to.
Absolutely. Yeah, that'd be great. It's been wonderful catching up, and I don't think I said anything that will endanger the home life or the employment. So.
Yes, I don't think so. If anything, you wake up in the middle of the night, you're like, oh, I shouldn't have said that. I can always cut it out. It's no big deal.
Right.
I think you're safe.
All right, that was my talk with Wayne Edmondson. I hope you enjoyed that. Wayne, a solid dude from my LSU days, and teaching and enjoying the teaching life down in Louisiana. This has been American Rambler. I'm Colin Woodward, author of Marching Masters, Slavery, Race, in the Confederate Army During the Civil War, available through University of Virginia Press. You can check out the book on Amazon, or you can contact me for a $35 signed new copy that includes shipping. So if you want to do that, please get in touch with me, and hopefully before you know it, I'll have another book that I can be relentlessly plugging, and hopefully the second book will help me sell copies of the first book and vice versa. So it is a never-ending cycle of self-promotion in the 21st century. So if you want to follow me on Twitter, you can do that. Colin E. Woodward at Twitter, or whatever the handle is. Check me out there, and also on Instagram. All right, well, I will be talking with you soon and talking with a new guest. So be safe, wash your hands, wear your mask, and you will be hearing from me soon. Take care. Bye.